the desert bell, stood alone on a weathered wooden post, its iron mouth darkened by sun, sand, and years of warnings ignored too late. Caleb Turner rang it every morning and every evening, just as he had for the past 7 years. The sound carried across the open desert deep, hollow, impossible to mistake. It warned of sudden sandstorms, flash floods in dry arroyos, and the dangerous heat that could turn a simple crossing into a death sentence. Most folks listened. One woman did not. Caleb squinted toward the horizon as the bell's echo faded. There, just as yesterday, was a lone figure, moving steadily through the sand. A woman in a wide-brimmed hat, skirts tucked for travel, walking like the bell was nothing more than a fly buzzing in her ear. "She's either brave or foolish," Caleb muttered. He wiped his hands on his trousers and watched her for a long moment. She carried a satchel slung over her shoulder and walked with purpose, not haste. No panic, no hesitation. That was what bothered him most. People who ignored the bell usually ran thinking speed could save them. This woman didn't run. She simply continued. Caleb had been hired by the Territory Council after a flash storm wiped out 3 travelers years back. The bell was his duty, his penance, and his livelihood. He believed in it, the way a preacher believed in Scripture. And yet, day after day, now this woman challenged that belief with every step she took. By noon, the heat pressed down like a living thing. Caleb climbed down from the small shelter beside the bell and filled his canteen. He hesitated, then slung it over his shoulder and started walking. He found her near a dry mesquite grove, kneeling to examine the cracked earth. Up close, she looked younger than he expected, mid-20s, maybe. Dust clung to her skirts, and her dark hair was braided tight, practical. When she noticed his shadow, she looked up calmly, brown eyes sharp and curious, rather than startled. "You're a long way from town," Caleb said. "So are you," she replied. He frowned. "I rang the bell. I heard it. Then, why didn't you turn back?" She stood, brushing sand from her hands. "Because I needed to get here." "That bell's not a suggestion," he said. "It's a warning." She tilted her head. "About storms that may or may not come." Caleb stiffened. "About dangers you don't get to argue with." A small smile tugged at her lips. "Then, it's fortunate I know the desert." He studied her, now not just her stubbornness, but the way she stood with the wind instead of against it, the way her eyes tracked the sky without fear. "You've been crossing alone?" "Yes." "For how long?" "A while." She adjusted her satchel. "My name's Mary." Caleb hesitated, then nodded. "Caleb, I keep the bell." "I know," she said. "That's why I wanted to see you." It caught him off guard. "You ignore my warning bells, just to meet me." "I ignore them because I don't believe they're always right," she said evenly. "But I was curious about the man who rings them, like his life depends on it." Caleb crossed his arms. "It does. Other people's too." Mary studied him, her gaze thoughtful, not mocking. "Then maybe," she said, "you should walk with me one day. See why I don't turn back?" The wind shifted, then warm and restless. Caleb glanced toward the sky, instinct tugging at him. He had never walked past the bell during warning hours, never questioned its authority. But standing there in the desert, with Mary waiting and the bell silent behind him, Caleb felt something unfamiliar stir. Curiosity. And, for the first time, he wondered if the bell told the whole story or just part of it. Caleb didn't answer Mary right away. The bell stood miles behind him now, unseen but ever present in his mind, like a watchful eye. He glanced at the sky, again clear, endless blue, not a cloud in sight. No wind strong enough to carry a storm, no smell of rain. By all signs he trusted, the desert was calm. Still, rules were rules. "I don't leave the bell during daylight crossings," he said finally. Mary raised an eyebrow. "Then why did you follow me?" That question landed heavier than he expected. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Truth was, he hadn't fully decided until his feet were already moving. Something about her steady stride and unshaken confidence had pulled him forward. "To make sure you don't get yourself killed," he said. She smiled, not triumphant, just amused. "Then you might as well walk with me a bit longer. I won't slow you down." Against his better judgment, Caleb fell into step beside her. They walked in silence for a time, the desert stretching wide and quiet around them. Caleb noticed how Mary chose her path, carefully avoiding soft sand, skirting low ground where water might rush if rain fell miles away. She paused now and then to feel the air, to watch distant heat ripples. "You've done this before," Caleb said. "I grew up with it," Mary replied. "My father mapped old trade routes. He taught me how to read land the way some folks read books." Caleb nodded slowly. "Most people trust the bell more than their own senses." "That's not always wrong," she said. "But sometimes warnings become habits, and habits stop people from thinking." He bristled. "That bell has saved lives." "I'm sure it has," Mary said gently. "I'm not saying it shouldn't ring. I'm saying it shouldn't be the only voice people listen to." They reached a rise, overlooking a shallow basin. Mary stopped and crouched, pressing her palm to the ground. Caleb watched, puzzled. "No storm today," she said. "Ground's too dry. Wind's wrong direction." Caleb squinted at the horizon, searching for signs he might have missed. Everything looked fine. That unsettled him more than danger would have. "You ever been wrong?" he asked. Mary stood, brushing sand from her skirt. "Yes, and when I am, I turn back. I don't pretend I know everything." Caleb absorbed that quietly. He had been trained to believe certainty was safety. Ring the bell, trust the rule, never question it. They continued walking until the sun climbed high. Heat shimmered around them, but Mary moved easily, conserving energy. When Caleb slowed, she offered him water from her satchel without comment. "Why do you keep crossing?" he asked after a while. "There's nothing out here but sand and risk." She glanced at him, then ahead. "Because not everything worth knowing sits behind walls and warnings. There are old markers buried out here. Stories people forgot once they started relying on bells." That struck deeper than he expected. They reached a cluster of rocks where Mary finally stopped. "This is as far as I go today." Caleb exhaled, realizing he hadn't noticed how far they'd walked. He turned back toward the bell's distant post, invisible, but calling to him all the same. "You'll cross again," he said. "Yes. And you'll ignore the bell." "Not ignore," she corrected. "I listen. I just don't obey blindly." Caleb met her gaze. There was no challenge in it, no only openness. "If the bell rings hard," he said slowly, "promise you'll turn back." Mary considered him, then nodded. "If you promise to look at the sky before you ring it." They stood there a moment longer, the desert quiet between them. As Caleb turned to leave, he realized something had shifted. The bell no longer felt like a wall separating safety from danger. It felt like a question, and Mary, walking away in the opposite direction, had become the only answer he wanted to understand. The wind changed before noon. Caleb felt it first, not on his skin, but in his bones. A subtle pressure, a wrongness, that made him stop mid-step as he returned to the bell. He scanned the horizon, heart tightening. Far to the west, a thin brown veil lifted from the ground, stretching upward like a breath drawn too deep. "Sandstorm." He broke into a run. By the time Caleb reached the bell post, the air had thickened, heat pressing down in uneasy waves. He didn't hesitate. Gripping the rope, he rang the bell, hard and fast. The iron cry tore across the desert, urgent and relentless. "Mary." The thought struck like a blow. She had said there would be no storm today, but storms didn't always ask permission. Caleb rang again, harder, until his arms burned. When he finally stopped, the echo rolled back thinner, swallowed by the rising wind. He grabbed his coat and canteen and ran. The storm advanced faster than he feared. Sand scoured his face as the sky dimmed, turning the world into a blur of brown and gold. Caleb pushed forward, following the path they had walked earlier, praying she hadn't gone farther. "Mary," he shouted, though the wind tore his voice away. He spotted her near the rock cluster, struggling to secure her satchel. Her braid whipped loose, sand biting into her skin. Relief surged through him, sharp and dizzy. "I heard it," she yelled, as he reached her. Too late to turn back. Caleb grabbed her arm. "We need shelter now." They stumbled toward the rocks, ducking into a narrow crevice just as the storm slammed into them, full force. Sand roared like water, filling the air, stealing breath. Caleb pulled his scarf over Mary's mouth and nose, pressing her close to shield her from the worst of it. Minutes stretched into something shapeless. The storm howled, then slowly weakened, the fury passing as suddenly as it had come. When silence finally returned, it felt unreal. Mary pulled back first, eyes wide but steady. "I was wrong," Caleb swallowed. "And I almost wasn't fast enough." They sat there, backs against stone, breathing in the dusty calm. For the first time, the bell's warning echoed in Mary's mind, not as nuisance, but as lifeline. "I rely too much on patterns," she admitted quietly. "I forget the desert can change its mind." Caleb nodded. "And I rely too much on rules. I forget people aren't all the same." They shared a look. Then no stubbornness left, only understanding, earned the hard way. When they finally emerged, the desert looked reshaped, smoothed by wind. Mary dusted herself off and met his gaze. "Walk me back," she asked. Caleb didn't hesitate. Always when the bell rings true. Together, they headed toward the distant post, the iron bell standing silent, but wiser now. Much like the two people walking beneath the clearing sky. After the storm, Mary stayed closer to the bell, not because she feared the desert, but because she had come to respect the sound that guarded it. Caleb noticed her more often now, appearing in the mornings with her satchel and steady stride, sometimes crossing, sometimes turning back, always pausing to look at him before deciding. They began to talk. At first it was practical wind patterns, cloud shapes, old routes, and new dangers. Caleb learned that Mary marked forgotten trails and water signs, recording them in a small leather-bound notebook. She learned that Caleb had once been a traveler himself, until a warning bell too far away had cost a family their lives and chained him to this post ever since. "I thought, if I stayed," he admitted one afternoon, "I could make sure it never happened again." Mary listened, without interruption, her expression soft but steady. "You stayed to protect others," she said. "That matters." "But I stopped living," he replied. The truth of it sat heavy between them. Days turned into weeks. The bell rang, sometimes soft warnings, hard ones, moments when the desert demanded respect. And there were long stretches of silence when Caleb and Mary sat in the shade of the post, sharing water and stories. Mary laughed easily. Caleb found himself waiting for that sound almost as much as he waited for storms. She taught him how to read the ground with his hands, how to feel the air before the sky changed. He taught her how to hear the bell's echoes, not just its sound, but how far it traveled, how quickly it faded. "It's not just iron," he said once. "It's timing and trust," Mary replied. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the desert in fire and gold, Mary lingered longer than usual. The bell had rung earlier, mild warning, and now everything was calm. "I may head east soon," she said quietly. "There are routes there I need to map." Caleb felt the words like a tightening rope. "For how long?" "I don't know." Silence stretched between them, thick with things unsaid. Caleb looked at the bell, then back at Mary. "I used to think this post was all I had," he said. "Now it feels like it's what's keeping me from moving." Mary stepped closer. "The bell needs a keeper," she said. "But the keeper doesn't need to be alone." Their hands brushed, a small contact that carried more weight than any storm. Caleb didn't pull away. The desert breeze stirred, gentle and warm. When Mary finally left that night, Caleb stood by the bell long after she disappeared into the fading light, realizing that the space between the ringing had become the place his heart lived most. The morning Mary left, The desert was quiet. No wind, no shifting sky. The bell hung still, catching the first light of dawn. Caleb rang it once softly, not as a warning, but as a habit he was learning to let go of. Mary approached with her satchel packed fuller than before. She smiled when she saw him, though her eyes held the weight of leaving. "I'll be back," she said. "The desert has more to show me." Caleb nodded, then reached up and untied the rope from the bell. It clanged once, startled. Mary's brows knit. "Listening," he said. For once, he rested his hand on the iron, feeling its cool certainty. "I've given enough warnings to last a lifetime. It's time I start walking between them." Mary searched his face. "Are you sure?" Caleb smiled, quiet and sure. "The bell doesn't lose its purpose if I step away. It gains a partner." He lowered the rope gently and turned toward the open desert. Mary's breath caught as she realized what he meant. They walked together, side by side, neither leading nor following. The bell remained behind them, silent, patient, still watching over the land it guarded. As the sun climbed higher, Mary slipped her hand into Caleb's. He squeezed back, steady and warm. The desert stretched wide, ahead uncertain, beautiful, alive. And for the first time, neither of them felt the need to turn back. Forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.